So very excited today to be able to welcome back a guest to Off the Podium. We spoke to her in March of 2021, little less than a year away from an Olympic Games, where we talked about her career, her prospects for the Olympics, her naming of the sled and everything else in between then. And since we last spoke to her, she did qualify for an Olympics, did quite well at the Olympics, and she's here to talk about her time at the Olympics and everything else in between. It's a pleasure to welcome back to the show the one, the only, Breeana Walker. Bree, first of all, big pleasure to have you back on the show. Thanks for joining us once again on Off the Podium.
Thanks for having me back. I'm excited to be back and chat all things Olympics and bobsleigh and future. So yeah, let's go.
It's so exciting because it's similar. We had Dean and Tali back on a couple of weeks ago, and we'd also spoken to them several months out from the Olympics. And we always like to brag a little bit here and off the podium, say like we got you on before everyone knew who you were. Like, I mean, everyone knows you now. Everyone knows Dean and Tali now. You're old household names in Australia. But back when we got you on, you were just the great athletes that we were touting as great athletes. So I just want to take some subtle credit for that, Bree.
Yeah, go for it. That's fine.
Yes. I'm glad that you can be on board with that. But I mean, it's the time of recording this. We're recording this at the beginning of May in 2022. So it's been now nearly, I guess, 3 months since Beijing. I mean, it's hard to believe it's been that long. I mean, it feels like it was just yesterday. I mean, how have you been since coming back from Beijing? Has it been a bit of a whirlwind, kind of adjusting back to post-Olympic life now?
Yeah, and it definitely doesn't feel like it's been 2 or 3 months, that's for sure. And I'm pretty, when I landed in Australia, I still kind of kept going because I had a whole bunch of people, obviously very excited about my results at the Olympics. And they were like, all right, what do you want to do for the next 4 years? I'm like, guys, I don't even know what I want to do for the next 4 minutes. But it was important that I was to, jump on that enthusiasm. And so I had to put together my 4-year plan. I had to put together my 4-year budget and then just talk with people about how I'm going to achieve what I want to achieve over the next 4 years. So I kind of just had to keep rolling a little bit. And it's been nice, over that time, everything is slowly kind of dialed down and I've been able to relax a little bit more and, enjoy the time with my family and my friends. But yeah, it has kind of just kept rolling from the Olympics. And physically, I took a huge break. I was like, nah, that's it. I don't want to see a gym. I don't want to look at weights or an athletics track for at least a month. But again, I've slowly started to get back into that over the last little while. And then, I'd probably stay in Australia for another month. And then once I head back to Germany, it's going to be everything's just going to kick off again, full-time training, and then just, trying to piece together the puzzle so I am ready for the next 4 years.
Is that pretty much the worst question to ask an Olympian after an Olympics? Is you're looking forward to 2026? Are you ready to go? Because as you were sort of saying there, you've got a lot to digest and everything from that. And it's a long time to commit, particularly for winter athletes in Australia where you've got to work out, as you said, things like budget and things like that. So Is it just a case of after the next Olympics, if people are talking to you, don't ask about the next Olympics for at least a few months?
Yeah, well, don't ask at least straight after the event. I think that was the one thing that I was just like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. After I just finished everything, it's so crazy. You're just working for 4 years, you're just solely focused on this one event. And of course, there's stepping stones along the way. So you have other goals that you want to achieve along the way before you get to that big goal of the Olympics. But once you get there and you've achieved this big goal of being at the Olympics, you just kind of have to digest that. And then, when people ask you oh, are you ready for the next 4 years? And I'm just like, I don't know, I need to give me a minute. But no, for me, I always knew that the next Olympics was going to be a goal for me. And it was just figuring out how I need to do that. So that's what I needed a minute for. I'm I need a minute to figure out how I'm going to get to the next 4 years. So I'm slowly getting there. It's definitely, I haven't figured that out yet, but I'm slowly getting there. And that's also very exciting.
You mentioned about you don't want to see the gym, you just want to take some time off, all those things. I can almost weirdly imagine it's almost a great time for an Olympian in that initial period, because then it is that case of no gym. I don't have to worry about my diet. Fuck it. I'm going to eat McDonald's. I'm going to eat this. Like, is that kind of this glorious little period after an Olympics where it's kind of like, you just like the rest of us, Bree. You just do what you want when you want and don't care about the body for 5 minutes.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I did. I'm very like strict, and I regimented in how I manage everything in my life. So my physical training, my mental training, eating, sleeping, recovery, all that. I do have a process to all those elements. But after the Olympics, I was just like, I'm doing whatever I want. And like, even like I'm gluten intolerant, I have other food intolerance. I ate everything under the sun. And I was just like, I'll suffer consequences later. Like I'm eating everything, I'm doing everything. And that's been really enjoyable. But I feel like I only like to do that for so long. And so I didn't relish in it for too long. I kind of just gave myself a little bit of time to be free and do whatever like I felt like doing. But I've slowly kind of come back to my ways, because I think I just like it better. I don't do it because I want to stay fit and look fit and all that kind of stuff. It's just like I actually enjoy, eating healthy and working out and sleeping and recovery practices. Like I enjoy all that. So I've just slowly gotten back into my general way of life.
What was the one food that you hadn't had basically for a while that you relished and you made the most of when you could?
Almond croissants.
Ooh.
Absolutely love them. I went a little bit crazy. It was, wow. I was to the point where I was having a few a week, and I was just like, oh, Bree, you probably need to throw that back.
Save some for the next cycle, and just, you can eat the world out of them basically. So
yeah. No, I was like, when I was having a few a week, and they're very expensive too. And so
right, exactly, of course. Almond, it's not normal croissants, almond croissants. Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, no, they're the fancy ones. Yeah.
Gotta go out. I mean, again, you're an Olympian now, so you're allowed to treat yourself every now and then to an almond croissant.
Don't get me wrong, I probably will still treat myself to them, but I just like not multiple a week. Maybe just one on the weekend or on my rest day or something. But yeah, no, I went a little bit crazy, but YOLO. It was just after the Olympics, and I missed them, and I just went for it.
Since we last spoke, obviously the Olympics we'll get to, but sort of in the lead up to the Olympics, you had the World Cup for obviously the monobob and the two-man as well. Just through that whole process, how did you go into that feeling? I mean, obviously there's pressure, I can imagine, thinking that's an Olympic cycle, so there's that on the mind, but was it a case of coming off the back of the successful season you'd had the year before, that you were feeling great? This was kind of, you'd had a good off season. I mean, was it all just the confidence going into that in the lead up to what led to ultimately qualifying for the Olympics? Yeah,
that was exactly it. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that I had the potential to hit podiums, especially in the monobob. And so I was excited and confident to just go out there and do that. And my first race actually, because the beginning of the season we went to China and we learned the new track for the first time, and that was a really tricky way to start your season, because you go into a track that you've never slid on before and you don't know how to slide on, because everyone's kind of playing a guessing game at this stage, because you're not given the instructions on how to drive down this track. You simply just go to the track, you look at the corners, you say, I think this is how we would drive this corner. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, I hadn't been behind the sled in like 6 months. So you always want to start the season a little bit slower to get used to driving again. But I hadn't had that opportunity to do that because we had to ship our sleds over to China. So it was a really rough way to start the season. And so then when we went back to Europe and started sliding in the World Cups, my first race was really rusty. And I think I came 6th in my first race. And I was like, that's not what we had prepared for. We hadn't prepared to come 6th. We had prepared to hit podiums. And so I sat down with my coach and we analysed a few things, and we were like, we're going to have to make some pretty big changes if we want to be able to like start hitting podiums. And it was risky. Like we changed up some our equipment, and I changed like certain ways of driving the track, and we just went for it in the next week. And it was either going, it was either going to be a big flop or a big success. And it was a good success. I came third in that race, and that just started the role of hitting the podiums each week. And then my confidence slowly built more and more and more. And so, that was really the way I wanted to execute that season, especially in monobob.
When you talk about changing the driving style, how do you do that? Like, is it a case of something mentally you do, something physically? I mean, what do you change up, and how do you do that?
It was just more mentally, and getting used to driving on a track that I'd known, I know how to drive, because we were obviously in China, and I was trying to get used to driving that track. And China was very different compared to all the other tracks, like all over the world. And he's just like, we have to kind of like rein it in and drive how you normally drive. And I guess I hadn't kind of put China behind me yet, and come back to knowing how to drive the track in like Eagles, because that's where we were at in Austria. And so it was more mental. It was not like physically changing anything. It was just more mentally like resetting and zoning back into knowing how to drive this track.
And was that something, going back to the fact that it was an Olympic year, like if hypothetically this wasn't an Olympic year, is that something that would worry you as much, I suppose, in a non-Olympic cycle? Or because it's an Olympic year, you feel like there's a bit of extra pressure to get that right quicker, rather than later?
Yes and no. I feel like in the beginning I was like, oh my gosh, I just came sixth in that race. That is definitely not what I want to be producing. But luckily I have very good people around me that kind of just like said, okay, cool your jets, like it's fine. Let's just figure out how, reset and figure out how we want to execute next week. And that's exactly what we were able to do. And so I'm very lucky that I guess I've developed as an athlete, I'm matured as an athlete to be able to like stop myself from panicking too much. And then I also have people around me that are able to do the same. And we just kind of all reset together, and then we move forward and just try and execute what we know that we can.
I know we talked last time a bit about the qualification process and sort of how it works a little bit, but obviously you're mentioning with the monobob, you go sixth first, but then you go third first, second, seventh. So basically through all that period, I guess knowing that, okay, I'm doing enough to qualify a sled for the Olympics in the monobob. But of course, you're then working on the two-man as well. I mean, how is that then mentally for yourself? Because personally, you were probably thinking, okay, well, it looks good for me in the monobob, and I'm going to qualify Australia for the monobob, but I'm working on this too. And you've got a very stacked Australian female bobsled team of a lot of athletes to sort of work around there. So, I mean, how is that mentally to kind of balance the two and try and say focus on both of them at the same time?
Yeah, and that's been quite hard over the especially the last 2 years. Because of the introduction of the new monobob sleds, they were actually really quite different to drive compared to the old plank sleds that I was driving for the first 2 years, the old plank monobob sleds. But then they were also very different to drive compared to our two-man. So trying to balance up or learn how to drive the two different kinds of sleds was really quite difficult. But then you also have to add in the element that in the two-man you have somebody else in the back. And you can't obviously influence how they're going and how they're going to perform. You obviously, like as a pilot, I try and support my team as much as possible so they are able to execute their best performance, but you can't have that much of an impact. And unfortunately, Sarah even had a concussion, and she got a concussion from a rough ride in China. And then so she was working her way back up to fitness. And in our first race, I thought we were going to be all ready to go. And both of us didn't produce a very good performance. And again, it's just a matter of reviewing that race and be like, okay, how are we going to produce a better performance? And so that's the kind of what we had to do. And like I said, having the element of having somebody else in the back does play a factor. And our federation wanted to like they suggested this year that we do a little bit of switching around of brakemen here, there and everywhere. And then that's how Kiara ended up actually in my team through the suggestion of the Federation. But I haven't really experienced that before. And so you're obviously quickly trying to work with somebody that you've never really worked with before. And I think that does mean that you fluctuate in your results. Like you can see, like with monobob, my results were relatively consistent because it's just me in the sled. But having somebody else and then changing that up all the time, it means your results are going to go up and down. So mentally, I just had to kind of stay on my game and just try and be like, okay, you just have to go out there and produce your best performance, and then hopefully that your teammate is going to go and do the same. And then looking forward, I think for the next 4 years, I've learned a lot about two-man over the last 2 years. And then I think there's just things I'm going to try and implement and to help my team have a little bit more consistent results in the two-man.
Because it's that fascinating situation you're talking about there about how it was sort of alternated, because I remember watching the very first World Cup, obviously yourself and Sarah, you've got Ash, Kiara, like it's kind of just these elements of it. Then all of a sudden they switch it up around, and then ultimately it's you and Kiara who go when sort of, as you said, you've been working a lot with Sarah for most of the time too. So yeah. How is that then put on the selection committee when you qualify a sled? You've got so many great athletes to choose from, and then ultimately it's you and Kiara get the nod. Like, I mean, do you have an idea of how that works? Are you able to give suggestions? Like, hey, I think maybe Kiara's the way to go here. I mean, like, how does all that work that you and Kiara end up going there when, say, you've not been working with her as long as some of the other athletes there?
Yeah, so as the selection committee came to me and they asked me, what my suggestion would be. And I said, honestly, I've been working with Sarah for 3 years, so we know each other inside and out. And Sarah's I feel very comfortable with Sarah, and she's been my ride and die for the last 3 years. So I obviously feel very confident with her. But like I said, she had a concussion and she also got COVID at Christmas time. And so she was really struggling she was always nearly peaking, and my push coach was telling me, yeah, Sarah's getting back into form. She's doing very well. And then she was hit with a road bump. And it was just really hard because we just together as a team, we weren't able to lay down a performance that was better than what me and Kiara did within our first few races together. And so if you're thinking in terms of high performance, you have to go with whoever who's produced the best performances. And that was ultimately Kiara. And I was very lucky that Kiara had done a fantastic job in our first race. We actually came 7th, which is my career best performance, but then also Australia's equals Australia's career best performance as well. And so you can't deny that is a fantastic performance. And so I just said to the selection committee, it's ultimately up to you and however you choose. But in terms of high performance, I can see that Kiara has produced a fantastic performance. Sarah is my go-to, and I'm going to be feel very comfortable with her. So it's up to the selection policy, I guess. And the selection policy obviously focuses on high performance, and that's ultimately why Kiara was able to go.
And do you then know that you're going to be the pilot of the two women? Because obviously Ash is involved in, I guess, how the whole qualification points in qualifying that sled. So, I mean, do you get the tap on the shoulder to say, hey, we're choosing you as the driver over Ash? Or do you not know that until a certain, how does all that work out that you're able to put for those suggestions?
Yeah, our selection policy always said that the person with the highest rank combination score, so the combination of monobob and two-man, would be the pilot that was selected. So I was well above Ash in that sense. So I knew that I was going to be selected. And just the weird way that the IBSF works is that they were selecting nations, or having nations get the quota position through the two-man, and it was quite confusing how that was done. So yeah, I did know how I was tracking, especially with monobob, that was keeping me ranked very high. So I knew how I was going, and probably how it was all going to go down around selection time.
And I can imagine that's then tricky to, I guess, talk to Sarah, somebody who, as you said, she's your ride or die. You've worked with her for so long, and ultimately it comes down to she goes as a reserve. I mean, do you break that news to her before she hears it from the selection, given that you've got that close relationship, or is it kind of a bit of the other way around and then you've got to sort of have that chat with her?
I didn't know that she wasn't going to be selected as the competing brakeman. I found out when she found out.
Wow.
So I was just able to give suggestions of who I would select, and ultimately I was just like I'm happy with both. And there's pros and cons to both girls. And I then walked in, like the morning that we got the email saying that we were selected as a brakeman and pilot, I walked in Sarah's room and I was just like, hey, did you get an email? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, what did it say? And she said, it said reserved. And I mean, me and Sarah are very close, and we're teammates, but we're also friends. And we just sat there and we just hugged and we cried because like ultimately like we tried to do it together, and we've been through a lot together. And that moment for us was like, it was a bit heartbreaking, but we knew what we needed to do, and we knew like why it was ultimately selected in that way, because it was focusing on high performance. And then Sarah just like, you know, took the bull by the horns, and she was just like honestly the best spare I could have ever asked for. And ultimately, like a lot of my results this season have been because Sarah has been like I said, my ride and die, and has been able to help me so much. So I can't commend her more on the way she acted. She acted so professional, and I hope she's still part of my team in the future. But if she does go off and she does decide to go and pilot herself, I wish her all the best. So, because I know, like, if you don't ultimately make your Olympic dream happen on somebody else's team, you got to go and secure it yourself. So, and that's the way bobsleigh seems to work. You know, you're a brakeman for a little bit and then you go off and pilot, and she's young enough to be able to go do that. So if that is what happens, then I wish her all the best, and I'm excited because then I guess she ultimately becomes a competitor, and
yeah.
it's good to have friendly rivalry, you know, and so that'll be exciting to see Australian bobsleigh grow even more.
Well, you know that better than anyone, I guess, kind of from the heartbreak to obviously 4 years later, obviously with what happened to Pyeongchang to then what happened in Beijing. I mean, besides those emotions you're talking about there with Sarah, like just for yourself, when you got that confirmation that this is it, I'm an Olympian, was it again a case of amazement, or was it knowing what happened in Pyeongchang? Was it, I'm not fucking believing this until I'm at the start line? Like, I know this can happen. I know what can happen in this situation.
Yeah, sure. Like, no, I didn't allow myself to go there. I didn't. I got the phone call and I was selected as the pilot, and it just was like, it just made me kind of reflect on the last 4 years, and even like flash back to when I got the phone call from Ian Chessman, who's actually the new AOC president now. And he told me that ultimately we weren't going to be nominated for Pyeongchang. And now I got the phone call from the federation. They're saying that you're being nominated. I was just like, wow, like, look how far I've come. Like, and I'm so excited to be able to go and live out my dream. And yeah, I didn't allow myself to go there and like continue to think like, oh, maybe this isn't real, I was like, no, this is real. You deserve this. Like, embrace it.
Which, speaking of embracing it, we always like to hear from our guests, you know, that those moments that comes with an Olympics, from getting that phone call to getting the uniform to arriving in the village, all those kind of things. I mean, are you soaking that up more so now this time around because, again, of how close it was back in Pyeongchang? And what does that mean to you then when you're in the village and you've got your uniform and everything that led up to you ultimately getting to that start line?
Yeah, I think that those little bits, like getting my uniform, was a really big, exciting moment. It was like a big aha moment. Like, I was just like, wow, like, this is awesome. And I actually really didn't video or do any like kind of Instagram stuff during it, because I was just like, I'm doing this by myself, and because this is something that I have dreamed of for so long. and then also going to the opening ceremony. And China did it so well there. They had the Olympic rings just in front of where the athletes were walking in. And that was another moment that I was like, oh my God, you are here, girl. Like, you have made it. And this is what you have been watching like all your life, like athletes just walk into the opening ceremony, and I am here standing and doing exactly what I've been watching for years. And so they were the moments that I really enjoyed and really took in. But then when it came to competition, I just kind of went through my normal motions and tried to make it as close to a World Cup competition as possible.
What was the vibe like going into the opening ceremony, given that Dean and Tali had obviously been competing? I mean, back here in Australia gone bloody curling crazy. We were already hooked into the Winter Olympics. But was there something a little bit more, I guess, exciting, given that Australia had already been competing, and you're walking out there with Dean? Obviously, he's there as well because they're competing basically right next to the bird's nest. I mean, was it just something a little bit of an extra spark amongst the Australian team, given that Australia had already been competing the days in the lead up to the opening ceremony?
I must admit, I really was like focused on what I needed to do at that moment. Like, we rolled into China, and I actually had both of my coaches had gotten COVID just before leading into the Olympics. And so we kind of had to like set up and do everything ourselves as soon as we hit the ground. And so the going to the opening ceremony was the first time that I had really kind of been like, oh my gosh, I'm here, because I'd just been on autopilot for like since I had landed in China. And I was just like, that was the first moment where I saw Dean, and then actually it was really awesome. Like Dean and Pete were sitting there, Pete's their coach, and we saw them competing on the screen as we were getting ready to go into the bird's nest for the opening ceremony. And I was just like, oh, we're already on. We're off here. We're off and running. And it was really cool to be able to meet the other athletes and ask how their preparation was going and everything like that. And so that was a really cool pause moment for me to just be like, wow, take this in, because this doesn't happen every day.
So with that in mind, sort of in the lead up to your event, because you're sort of towards the end, obviously, well, I guess in the middle area for the monobob, and then towards the end with you and Kiara. I mean, just with the sliding team, are you sort of, close with and sort of paying attention to? Obviously, Alex had a great, event, and then, you've got Nick going on there, and then obviously what happens with Jacqueline. Like, I mean, is it kind of something that you can focus on that to soak a bit of that in, or are you still so focused on yourself that you can't sort of let yourself get involved in that?
No, you definitely like soak that in and take that in. That was a really cool part. Like our village was actually quite small. There was only the sliding sports athletes and then the downhill skiers. And so when anybody was competing, we were like, oh, like everyone come into the lounge room and like make sure we're watching this. And I remember sitting there and watching Alex compete. And because I know how sliding works, I was just like, he is laying down a run here. And I was just like getting really excited. And everyone was like, what's happening? I'm like, he is nailing this, guys. Like, watch this. And then all of a sudden he like shot the last straight. And I was just like, he is like, that's money right here. And then he's just crossed the line and he's celebrating. And that was really, really cool. And, obviously when Jackie was going, like we also like kind of understanding the sports and like being around skiers, they were like, what's happening? And like, guys, she's on here, like she's going to lay down a run. And yeah, it was just like so cool to be able to also educate other people on sliding sports, because they also then educated us on like the skiing sports. And that was really cool to be able to just learn different sports and why like that athlete performed very well and why that athlete didn't perform so well. And then also you hear like, I would say like, oh, that's a mistake there. And then you'll recognize that down like a few corners down. And then by the end, like the people will be like, oh, that's a mistake right there, isn't it? I'm like, yeah, that's a mistake right there. And so it was really cool to be able to teach them about sliding sports.
Does that also help you then when you're watching the skeleton or the luge and you're seeing things like mistakes and things like that, that as a bobsledder, you can go, okay, well, I'm not going to take it that way, or I'm not going to do that. Can you sort of get advice from the different sliding sports to help you?
Yeah, a little bit. Like I talked to Dom, who's Jackie's husband, about it, and he was just saying like, the entry of Kreisel, which was a big 360 circle, is very important because everybody who enters Kreisel correctly is about 1 kilometre up at the exit. And I just kept watching that, and I watched how they entered and exited Kreisel, and it was true. And so I was just like, okay, so that is a corner that is like impeccable for me to be able to execute, so I can then exit the corner and be able to be a kilometre or so up. So that was really cool to be able to learn from somebody else.
What is that corner like? I mean, that corner just looks insane. I mean, was that as insane as it looked to be able to take that full speed in a bobsled?
Yeah, it was a really cool corner, and it was so long. Like, you have no idea. I think, like, if you were to watch like our World Cup races and you'd see other Kreisels, you'd be like, oh, that's a big corner. But for us, it flies through pretty fast. But that corner just took forever. And you were just like, you had so much time to assess where you were, which is very nice. Like, you obviously like want to be able to know where you are in space and be able to correct it if you have the time. But yeah, you just had so much time to be able to do that in that corner.
How positive was it I guess, going into your event in the monobob to see Jackie win that silver medal? Because I mean, I think it's something still that I think Australia needs to imagine, that we won a medal in a sliding sport. Well, we don't even remotely have a track in our country that can do that. I mean, it's still such an amazing achievement. But I mean, I can imagine, given that you went into the monobob as a, you know, very good medal chance, that that's got to give you a bit more energy, does it? Did that sort of help you in celebrating somewhat with Jackie before you got to your event?
Yeah, definitely. That, like, because we also had come off the excitement of Jakara winning gold.
Yeah.
And that was so motivating. Like, I was just like, yes, let's go. Like, that is so exciting. And then Jackie to come away with a medal. And also, like, I obviously know a little bit more about Jackie's, like, background and her journey, like, getting there. And that was really exciting because, like, knowing the story of how somebody got to where they are just makes it so much more enjoyable to watch them be successful and relish in the moment. And so that was really cool. And the morning of my event, I walked into the lounge and Jackie was there with her medal, and I was just like, oh my God, like, that's real. And yeah, it was a really cool moment to be able to share with her before I went out and competed.
It was amazing the day too when it came to your the final 2 runs, because that of course was the same day that we had the aerials going on as well. And I know I was working at Channel 7 at the time, and we were just like, wow, this is going to be like the biggest day. And at that point, I think we'd won all of 4 of our medals at that point too. So it was like, this is, you know, we could be getting 6 medals here. Like, it was unheard of, you know, going into that. So it was a very exciting time as a spectator, and as you're sort of saying, as an athlete there with a very successful Australian team, it's obviously pretty good moods when you eventually are able to hit the track and compete.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Like, the vibe was high, and I just kind of like rode that vibe all the way. So it was a great time for our team.
With the training runs, because they were getting a bit of attention in Australia because you were doing pretty well in the training runs, setting the fastest times and that. I mean, when you're doing a training run, are you worrying about the times and worrying that, hey, I'm the fastest, or is that just something that the media is paying attention to, that you're just worried about your own performance and don't care about where you're placed?
Yeah, I actually didn't even know that the training times were something that were televised or even paid attention to. And you often see me like on the camera, because like when we're at World Cups, they do record our training runs just to kind of, get used to positions and all that. And I'm always playing up to the camera, like blowing a kiss and having a good time, especially with the camera guys, because they're awesome and you talk to them behind the scenes. And so I didn't actually know that those training runs were being recorded. And,
they were live. We were watching them. We were on air, and we were actually watching them live.
So you guys all saw me being a fool.
We did, yes.
But I just with those training runs, like, I knew I was laying down runs and I knew that they were going very well, but I always know that it's just training, and that's not what matters. What matters is what counts is the results on the day. So I knew that I had people like Kaylee and Alana were going to come for me, and you can never rest on the fact that like your training is going well, so your race is going to go well. And yeah, it was just something that I was like, okay, I am going well. Let's just continue that process and go through it. it was ultimately like it was a little bit shocking that in my first run I didn't produce the performances that I had been producing in racing, in the training runs, sorry. And so I knew I had made a big mistake in the first run, and I was like, okay, let's hope that this doesn't knock me off too much, because my coach did say to me, my driving coach, he was like, you will always have one bad run, always. And he's like, what you need to do is then like kind of regroup and then go up and rectify the mistakes that you've made. So I was like, okay, I made a big mistake. I hadn't done that week. And I was like, I now need to go up and rectify it. And then to come up and see 10 next to my time, I was like, ooh, that hurts. And I was like, right, I'm never one to like count myself out, but this is going to be a lot of hard work to be able to get back up to where I want to be. And I learned a lot of lessons from that first day. I actually wasn't all that nervous. I actually think I squished a lot of my nerves and emotions, and to kind of, I guess, be on the other side of the bell curve. And that is what I think affected my performance on the first day so much, is that I didn't allow myself to feel the emotion and the nerves of competing at my first Olympics. And so, yeah, for me, I sat down and I reviewed that first day with my coach, and I was just like, all right, I know what I did wrong. It wasn't necessarily my driving. I just blocked out all my emotions. So now tomorrow I'm just going to go in there and enjoy the day. And so the next day I allowed myself to feel everything. I was nervous. I was excited. I like would look outside and like take in where I was at. I was like, I looked around at some of the athletes, but like not really. Like I just was kind of like scanning everybody and just feeling very in the moment. And I think that's how I was able to then go out on the second day and produce my best performances, because I just allowed myself to feel a lot more.
You're basically confirming that Cool Runnings is true, because if you remember in Cool Runnings on the first day, they sucked, and then they went the next day and they embraced their Jamaicanness and they embraced the emotions and they did really well. So you're confirming that Cool Runnings is, there you go, look at that.
Yes. I lived the Cool Runnings.
You literally did. You lived everything that they laid out on that first run in Cool Runnings. See?
Yeah, crazy. I didn't even realize that. So I need to go back and watch the movie again, because I didn't realize that. But yeah, that's pretty much what I did. And like it's for me, I've just come to terms with the fact that like that was my first Olympics, my first real highlight event where I was a true competitor. And so I'm going to take that experience and I'm going to bottle it up, and I'm going to put that towards the next 4 years.
Would it have been different had the two-man been first then? Do you think that then would have gotten those nerves out of the way had you and Kiara competed first, and then you say swap the monobob and the two-man around, and that would have made a difference?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a completely different ball game, because you have somebody else in your sled, and I think you're able to bounce off each other a little bit more. But in monobob, it's just you, and so I do approach them slightly different. But I guess there is a part of me that still keeps my team very involved in monobob. Like I still, like Sarah will always come up to me and give me a hug and like G me up a little bit, and you still feel like you're very much a part of the team, but you are alone standing on the block. And so like I just have to I don't need to focus on like a call or a cadence at the beginning to start. Like it's all just me, and I go when I want to go. So I do approach them slightly different.
10th after the first run, as you say, but then from that point on, you set the 5th fastest time in the second run, and the second fastest time in round 3, round 4. You ended up ultimately finishing 5th overall. I mean, the thing that was great about watching you at the end there was, I think some people probably thought like, oh, 5th, disappointed, genuine medal chance, but you embraced it. You were celebrating it. You were pumped. You were excited. The interviews you gave afterwards, you were so energetic and enthusiastic and proud of what you achieved. I mean, was there any disappointment at all that you gotten 5th and missed out on a medal, or was it just purely elation? You'd finished 5th in an Olympic Games and you didn't really care that you didn't get a medal?
No, I cared a lot. I cared
You're
a
a great
lot.
actor, Bree. There you go.
No, and it wasn't acting. It wasn't acting. Like I really was proud of the fact that I was able to go from 10th to becoming 5th. Like that is a hard feat in our sport. And I think like that's really something that I guess like I'm not sure if people actually quite comprehend. Like if you were 10th in the first run, you're probably able to jump up like a few spots, but like to be able to like pretty much jump up 5 spots and fight my way back like that was huge, and I was embracing that achievement. Don't get me wrong, I went away to my room and I cried and cried and cried because I was so heartbroken, because my goal was obviously a medal and I wasn't able to execute that as well as I wanted. If I had 2 days like my second day, I would have a medal around my neck. But I have come to terms with it, and I think I wrote in my Instagram post after the monobob event, like, don't get me wrong, like I obviously wanted more, but I'm content. And I am content that I came 5th at my first Olympics. And those girls, like I said in my post-race interview, those girls that were in front of me are some of the 4 best drivers in the world. So to be mixing it with them is huge. But don't get me wrong, I was upset that I didn't get a medal, and now that's the driving force for me for the next 4 years.
Because I can imagine, as you say, a driving force, because, you know, you make your mind up, you go to another Olympics, and then everything that you're just saying about those first race nerves, things like that, you've done now. First Olympics over and done with. So then you go to another one, and then you can just, like, I suppose, bottle all that up and put it towards an energy, and then that 0.43 of a second that you're off a medal, that's just nothing now, because you can just push towards and getting that medal around your neck in the next 4 years.
Yeah. And everything, like, you learn from every experience in your life, you learn something. And so that's all I did. I've just learned from this huge experience that I've just been through. And I can't beat myself up too much. I've never experienced an Olympics. I've never experienced a huge highlight event like that before, where I am a true competitor and people are hunting me down. And so I need to get comfortable with being hunted, and I need to get comfortable with being able to execute 4 high quality runs instead of just 2, because on World Cup we only have 2 heats. But I need to, at the Olympics and at a World Championships, you need to execute 4 runs to the best of your ability to be able to be on the podium. And so that's everything that I'm going to be doing over the next 4 years is going to be geared towards our highlight events.
Be honest with me, Bree. The reason why you were only 10th after the first run, you didn't name the sled Ben, did you? You didn't.
I told you I
did.
would.
Oh, okay. So maybe to be honest, that's why you got 10th in that first run. Then you just changed the name after the first one.
No, I mean, I call, like, that's my little baby, because it's like, it's smaller than my 2-man, so it's my little baby. But yeah, now, like, I told you I was going to name it Big Ben. So yeah, Big Ben did a pretty good job in the end.
Well, that's the nicest thing I think I've ever heard in my life. So I might just use that clip and isolate it and go, cool, awesome. I've just had that, my one chance at the Olympics. So I appreciate that. I mean, the event itself overall, obviously Kaylee winning the gold. I mean, the only non-German to win a sliding gold medal at the Beijing Olympics, which is absolutely insane, the dominance of the Germans. We're obviously a bit of a co-Canadian Australian show, so our Canadian co-host Colin may or may not be entirely happy with Kaylee that she won that gold for America, but that's a whole other conversation. But I mean, what's it like to at least be in, you said you've got those, 4 women ahead of you, the best in the world, and to have Kaylee, who's, so successful at the Olympics, and she's gone out and won this and dominated it as well. I mean, stacked field to finish 5th in a field like that, as you were saying, it's still obviously a pretty great achievement to finish behind those women.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like, I think what people have to understand, that those 4 women in front of me, they all have programs. They all have multiple coaches, programs that are well supported. And here I am, little Australia, self-funded, one coach running the show. I was able to bring in a fantastic physio, but again, like we just kind of like, it was a makeshift kind of program, and then we were still able to hang with the big programs, and that's something that's really huge. And I have to often remind myself that I'm mixing it with people who do have it like a fair bit easier than me. It's not something that like deters me or, you know, that gets me down, but it is something that you have to kind of like remind yourself occasionally, be like, girl, stop being so hard on yourself. Like you're mixing it with some people who have got pretty good setups, and you've created your setup. And so be proud of that you're able to achieve such a high performance result against those girls.
Which I can imagine too, if you put it in a different way. If you were to go back, let's go back to Vancouver and turn around and say, in 12 years' time at an Olympics, let's not even ignore the fact that Jackie won a silver medal, say that Australia's going to finish 5th in bobsled at an Olympic Games. You'd be like, wow, we'd take that, even for yourself, when you first get into a sled. And if somebody said to you, you're going to finish 5th in an Olympics, I think you're probably going to take that.
Yeah. And honestly, like at the beginning of this like last Olympic cycle, my goal was just to make the Olympics. Like I wanted to be a competitor, but it was just like actually being a competitor, not just coming last by 2 seconds that often does happen with the smaller nations that kind of scrape in on the continental position that we used to have. I wanted to be a true competitor. I wanted to qualify outright and be mixing it with those teams that have been sliding forever. I never anticipated that I could be challenging for the medals. It wasn't until 2 years out from the Olympics when I got my my first personal coach, and he said, if we do this right, we can actually challenge for the medals. And I was like, all right, cool, let's go for it. And like that, and then that season, and that World Cup season came, and I won my first 2 World Cup races, and I was like, we can actually do this. Like, and so it was just kind of like a realization over time that I can actually do something magical at these Olympics. Now, sitting here, I know that I have the capabilities to do that. So that's now the next goal. It's not like I'm going to put, like in a few years' time, be like progress and be like, oh, I can actually maybe do something magical at these Olympics. No, that's now the goal. And so that's what all my preparation and my planning is gearing towards.
Speaking of preparation and planning, the monobob finishes, you sort of go through those wave of emotions you're talking about, and you got to switch focus to the 2-man. How quick is that? Like how quick all of a sudden you say you go back to your room, you have a bit of a cry, you get that, but is it then just okay, back into competition mode? Come on, Kiara, let's do this thing.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it was the next day, was our first day of 2-man training, and so you really have to kind of get all those emotions out and gear up. And I actually did, the first day I went back and we did our first day of 2-man training, and it was shocking. And I was still driving like I was in the monobob sled. It wasn't working very well. I hadn't really let out of a lot of emotion from the race the night before, and I just felt a little bit all over the place. And I said to the girls, I need a break. I know myself now, I need to have a day. And I had that day, and I was able to do a lot of talking like with people and reset myself, so then I could go out on that last day of training and be able to do a much better training session and then go into the race feeling much more confident. Just
a 2-part question. I always am fascinated with particularly Winter Olympians in Australia when it comes to things like media attention, because you know, we unfortunately don't really pay much attention to a lot of the winter athletes until it comes to the Olympics. So you obviously got a little bit more of eyes on you as a country. But how do you adapt to a few more eyes on you than you're used to? But the second part of that question is, when you've got someone like Lydia Lassala who is there, who is obviously I think a bit of a mentor, a bit of a friend of yours. Like, does that make it a little bit easier when you've got her maybe to deal with a bit more than say if it was just somebody who you weren't overly familiar with?
Yeah, definitely. Like having Lyd as my mentor over the last year, and then having her at the games being a commentator, she was able to pre-warn me about, I guess, the hype that was about my competition. And I did have a few people kind of warning me. They're like, obviously, like people are marking you as a medal contender. So I was warned about it all. And so I definitely like knew that I couldn't get too excited about it. Like, and it's kind of, I guess, yeah, it definitely was the first time that I had so much media attention. Like as the season built, like I knew I was on the news at home and everyone was getting really excited for the Olympics. And so my friends would be sending me like, I guess, screen grabs of me being on the news at home. So I knew that there was like getting slowly more and more hype. But then that's also why when I was at the Olympics, I turned off my social media, because I'm like, I don't really need to know. Like, that's none of my business what's being said about me at home. I just need to focus on what I'm doing here on the ground. But then, yeah, having Lyd there was honestly the best thing, because she was just like this calming voice that just grounded me the whole time. And I knew that like she was obviously had her job to do, but she was much support, so much as like huge support to me at the games. And that was like, I guess her second job was being on the phone to me, calming me down and keeping me centered. And I'm so grateful to have her there.
And it's also too having someone like Alyssa Camplin as sort of what the deputy chef de mission. She was everywhere. Like, I mean, we kept saying on the show, like, God, she should be our closing ceremony flag bearer. I think we've seen her more on TV than some of our athletes. But I mean, like, and she's also seemingly so energetic and so positive as well. So I mean, it must be great to have someone like her constantly there as well, supporting you.
Yeah. And she actually had contacted me before the games just to see how I was going and how my preparation was. And then when we ultimately got nominated, she was just checking in to see if we were like going very well. And then as we like got to know each other more and more, we realized our backgrounds were quite similar. So like she'd come from track and field, and she actually was coached by my coach as well at Doncaster Athletics Club. And so that was really beautiful to be able to share that moment. And then I was able to talk to her and be like, look, we are all just track and field athletes that run on ice. Like, watch us in the warm up and see it. She's like, it's exactly like this. Like, that's so crazy. And so that was really cool to be able to like teach her about our sport and be able to like be relatable to each other a little bit. And then she was just such a big help, and it's so fantastic to like see her face at the finished dock, and she was able to help us, and she picked it up very quickly. She's a very good sled dog. I might take her on season. She has time.
Wow. We'll remember that, which is actually interesting, because we always joke when we get aerial skiers on the show. We're constantly saying like, you know, stop stealing the gymnasts. And then when we get the gymnasts on the show, we're saying like, just don't listen to those aerial skiers. You stay in gymnastics and maybe we can do that. But I like this sort of with the athletic side of things, obviously going into bobsled. I think that maybe what you need to do in the next 4 years, get someone like Peter Bowl, Rowan Browning, just like, you know, they did all right in Tokyo, sure. I'm sure they're going to do well in Birmingham, you know, very shortly. But like once that, bugger Paris, get them to go to Milan. Like, you know, then we can get the men's bobsled going. That'd be a good duo there.
Yeah. I mean, look, they can go do their Paris thing and then come over to bobsleigh. Like, I definitely think that like the pathway to come into bobsleigh is through track and field. Like it just sets such a good base. There is other sports, obviously, like you look into rugby, there's been volleyballers, obviously you have crossfitters that come in, but track and field just has such a good base for you to be able to then build strength and power on top of that for bobsleigh. So yeah, I guess like I'm hoping that the sport grows. I'm hoping that like the coverage that we did receive at the games entices people to look into bobsleigh and see if their talents lie there. We actually have recruitment camps going to be happening in the middle of May, or more towards the end of May. And I'll be attending those and hopefully see what kind of talent lies there, and see maybe if I'll be able to gather some new teammates for the next 4 years.
There you go. I like that. That's I'll get better at my running then, Bree, and maybe I'll come along to one of them. We'll see how
come on.
Yeah, never too late, right? I'm sure it can happen eventually. Just with the two man, ultimately finished 16th. I mean, obviously, given some of the success you and Kiara had sort of in those events, I mean, had you set yourself a goal sort of going into that, and sort of how did you both leave with that finishing result?
Yeah, I think the top 10 result was what I personally was aiming for, and I think that could have been achievable, but ultimately it wasn't meant to be. But it was Kiara's first time doing a highlight event and doing a 4-day event, and that can be quite intimidating. Again, it was like my first time again, I have competed in world champs before, but a lot of the time we're just like, especially in my early days of my career, we were just trying to get down the track. It was just an experience. But that was, again, my first highlight event where I really wanted to like give it a good hot crack. And so I was a little bit disappointed with the 16th. I think that didn't really show our true potential. But ultimately, me and Kiara, that was our fourth race together. It was on the big stage, and I just think you have to take those experiences, learn from them, and then moving forward, you put all your learnings into place.
So how does that then work with you as a duo now that you've done an Olympics? Do you sort of stay together? Do you go back to Sarah? Like, I mean, is that something that you're still working out kind of in the lead up to the next World Cup, and it's kind of a bit fluid and it kind of comes and goes with how it works?
Yeah, it just ultimately is working out what everybody wants to do. Kiara has said that she actually wants to have a break for a little bit and she wants to get her life set up in Australia. She may come back to the sport. I'm not too sure. But yeah, so that's why I'll be attending the recruitment camps and looking to see if there are any teammates out there that would like to come on board and join my team.
It does seem very stacked, though, in terms of at least in the lead up to Beijing, and obviously you're going to recruitment camps. But as we were talking about, you know, obviously with Kiara, we had Ash and Sarah on the show as well too. People like Stephanie and T. Like, I mean, bunch of obviously great athletes who are sort of involved there and thereabouts. So it seems as though we're kind of in a golden era a little bit for at least female bobsledding. Would you say, and that we hope to continue that in the lead up to Milan?
Yeah, definitely. I think we're in a golden era. For so many years, it was just Astrid, Locke Wilkinson, being the pilot and being able to qualify through our continental position. But now I think having like myself, having Ash, both being pilots, and then if Sarah is to go on and pilot herself, it means that like we've got three teams on like out there in the circuits, and so then you obviously bring in more females and to be brakemen and teammates. So yeah, it definitely is like a bobsleigh boom at the moment, especially in the female side.
I was going to say, do we need more men? Like, I mean, where are the men all of a sudden? Have we got a male bobsled shortage in Australia or something going on at the moment, Bree? Do I need to get involved here?
I think they're just trying to work out how they're going to do it, because the men's team is that's another whole different element of bobsleigh, because you have the 2-man and then you also have the 4-man, and the time it takes to become a top pilot in the 2-man in the men's field takes a very long time, but then to also become a top pilot in the 4-man is a whole different ball game. So I think that's why at the moment they're trying to work out what they're doing, and hopefully, and I think the federation is trying to set up like a bit more of a structure and a program to be able to develop a team from, I guess, like go to woe. And so I think that's a longer process and project for the federation. But I guess the women right now, we've got a big boom happening and it's exciting times. And so it'll be fantastic to be able to get some good athletes on board and to be able to develop them over the next 4 years.
We're obviously talking at the beginning of the interview about sort of finishing the Olympics, having a bit of time off yourself. But when you came back to Australia, you've obviously recently had a couple of events sort of celebrating the success of the team. But what's it been like to sort of come back and that whole attention thing? All of a sudden people probably know you a little bit more now. I don't know if you're getting recognised on the street, but visiting schools, people sending you more messages. I mean, how have you adapted to kind of that level of recognition?
Yeah, I've had people come up and say like how fantastic my performance was, and like how much that they enjoyed watching me and learning about my journey and learning about me as a person. And that's been really lovely to see, because again, I turned off my social media, and so I didn't really know how much coverage was actually happening of myself and my event. And so to actually like realize that people were watching me, getting excited about it was awesome. And then I think the best part about it all has been going to the events and meeting some people that I like obviously just looked up to for years and years. And you meet people and you learn about their stories and all that kind of stuff. And then you meet people that you've never even heard of before, but hear about their stories. I'm just like, wow, that's so amazing. and just getting to know people and rub shoulders with some greats. Like I went to the AOC AGM the other day, and that was just a pit full of legends. Like the Olympic alumni there was amazing. It was like James Tompkins, you have Patty Johnson, you have Lane Beachley, Natalie Cook. Like I'm just sitting there going, this is legit. This is awesome. And then you're able to just go and talk to them like normal people, and that's so nice. And because you do, like those people, sure, they've had a lot of media attention and success, but they're just normal people. And then that's been really cool to be able to do that. So yeah, I really enjoyed going to events and meeting new people and stuff. But I guess that's a big perk about it all. But yeah, I think I'm ready to go back to training now. Like I've had my fun. I've done all my events and all that kind of stuff. And so I'll have one more month here in Australia kind of organising things, and then I'm going to head back overseas and then be able to get back to work.
I also believe you graduated too in this sort of period between the Olympics and that too. So you kept busy there as well. So I mean, congratulations. What were you graduated in, and kind of what will that lead to in the future in a post bobsled career?
Yeah, I graduated in physical education teaching, which is something that has been a long time coming. And that was an 8-year process. I actually began that when I was a track and field athlete. So that tells you how long I've been doing that. And so I was first at RMIT, and then I got a full ride scholarship over to America as a 400-meter hurdler. And then I came back and I switched universities, and I still was continuing doing PE teaching at Deakin. And yeah, over the course of the last 4 years, I actually graduated, but I couldn't celebrate my graduation because of COVID, and I was over in Germany. So after coming back home, I was able to go and do that at Deakin, and that was a very nice end to that chapter. I was like, oh, maybe this is a little bit extra and like unnecessary that I do this now because I graduated back in 2019. But I'm like, no, go and celebrate it. Like, create a bookend to that journey, and I'm actually really glad that I did that, because now it feels like I'm like, yes, all right,
it feels
done
real
that
now. Yeah,
exactly.
You've worn the hat, you've worn the gown, you've done all the kind of formal stuff.
Yeah. Exactly.
Mum and Dad are happy you've got the photo that's on the mantelpiece, all that kind of.
Oh yeah, Mum's got my degree up here actually. She keeps it up here in Cairns. I think she's very proud of it, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, like I'm happy I've done that. I've ticked that box, and it's always something that I have in the back pocket. You know, like I don't think I will go into teaching. I do love teaching, and the reason why I decided to do teaching was that I was so heavily influenced by my teachers at my high school at Mount Lida Mercy College. They were so amazing, and a lot of my teachers there changed my life. So I really wanted to be able to do that for other students, but I think I can still do that for people, help them become the best versions of themselves in other capacities now with all the skills that I've developed from over the years.
Tell you one thing, it'd be cool to have a PE teacher though who was an Olympian. I mean, I'd listen more in school, like just yeah, that's a cool story to have. Two things before I let you go. Now, obviously, this is not me trying to put the pressure on you to go towards 2030, but I'm just saying it. You'll be there in 2030. At the time of recording this, they're sort of in the process where they're looking at the next host for 2030, this sort of new IOC process. They're visiting Salt Lake City. They're visiting Vancouver. There's cities in Spain and Japan as well that are looking at bidding. Right now, I'm going to ask you on the cusp, who would you like to see host the 2030 Olympics? Bree, would you like to go to Salt Lake? Would you like to go to Vancouver, Japan, Spain? Like, would you have a preference out of those four?
Oh, no, I wouldn't have a preference. I don't think. I don't think I would have too much of a preference. I think, surely somewhere in America would be awesome. I think they would put on a legit Olympics. I think they would be.
Salt Lake obviously did very well in 2002, and they haven't had. I mean, they're obviously about to have LA in 2028, but so they could potentially have 2 Olympics in 2 years, basically. You know, so
I tell you what, also having it in Japan would be a very good time difference conversion for us in Australia.
Very much
because
so.
that's what's been awesome about the last two Olympics. Like Pyeongchang and Beijing had like our time differences wasn't that big from Australia, and so everyone was able to watch our events pretty much live. And now that it's going back to Europe for Milano Cortina, people like might have to wake up in the middle of the night to watch some events, or they just will they'll just get it on the delay.
Well, I think we're going to see that with Birmingham for the Commonwealth Games. We've been so spoiled for the last few Olympics and Commonwealth Games that we're going to get back to getting up early for these things, right? Yeah.
So I think if we were looking for the benefit of us Australians, I think Japan would be awesome. I think they would also do a very cool Olympics, but I do think America would go above and beyond. I think that would be really cool.
I also think it would be great for Japan to get the Olympics as well, because Nagano was the first real Winter Olympics I remember in 98, and they were great. But also, given how Tokyo sort of happened with no real crowds and they couldn't really have a Olympics, so kind of, almost have that proper Olympics that they sort of missed out, sadly, with Tokyo. So
yeah. I definitely think that would be very nice for them, for sure. But you know what? If we were to be able to have an Olympics in Australia, a Winter Olympics in Australia for 2030, I would continue on.
Well, there you go.
I think my boyfriend Christian would kill me. I think my family would be like, "You're mad," but I would continue on.
Well, he's got to get to an Olympics too, right? I mean, I know we missed out for Beijing, but I mean that gives him a couple more to try towards, right?
Oh, I don't know if his body will hold up.
All the Germans get put through so much, right?
It's such a grind for them, and they have to do so much work just to be on their team. But if they're on their team, they're ultimately in the shop for the medals. And so the thing is that they. He has to, he's going again, and he's currently at home in Germany rehabbing his ankle because he dislocated his ankle in the qualification push test event. But yeah, he's going again. He's given it a good hard crack. And I think for us both, it's like, all right, I've been to my first Olympics. We couldn't do our debut together, but next time we're both gonna go for a medal. And then that's our next story together, and that's really exciting.
I see it. I've got this vision right now, Bree. It's gonna happen. All right, just focus on the goal. I'm gonna end this one question. Essendon, what's happening, Bree?
Oh, don't.
I'm a Carlton supporter. I've got to put some sort of bragging right somewhere.
You're rubbing your salt in the wounds. Oh, we're not doing great, are we? I went to actually the Anzac Day match, and that was an awesome match. And we should have won that. We just couldn't get the ball through the sticks. We just couldn't. And I was just sitting there being like, we should be so far in front here. But we just couldn't execute. And it was disappointing. But I'm a Bombers girl all the way, and I'll keep supporting him. We'll get there. We need Tipper back in the team. So, coach, put Tipper back in, and let's see what happens, because we're not doing so great at the moment.
I respect the loyalty. That's all that matters as any football fan. You have the hard times, and you remain loyal, and when they eventually come good, it makes it all the more better, right?
Right. And the funny thing is I've introduced Christian into AFL just at the time where Bombers aren't doing so well, and he's like, why are you making me go for this team? When I started going for them, we were we were in the grand finals, premiers and everything, so our time will come again. Look at Melbourne, look at them a few years ago. They were bottom of the ladder, wooden spoon favourites pretty much, and then now look at them. So I have faith that we will climb up the ladder in the future.
It's crazy to think. The thing that has been great about the AFL in the last, 10 or so years, we've seen, well, even, longer than that, we've seen so many teams break those droughts. When Sydney won it, when the Bulldogs, Richmond, Melbourne, these teams that have finally broken through. And that has happened in the fact that teams like Carlton and Essendon, who are the most dominant sides in the history, if St Kilda win the premiership anytime soon, the longest droughts will be on Carlton and Essendon, and that's something wrong there. That's a weird thing to say.
Well, let's hope St Kilda doesn't go up, because I'm not a St Kilda fan. That's all.
Yeah,
for sure.
And for personal reasons, I don't want Brett Ratton coaching another side to a premiership when we let him go. So we'll just we'll ignore that. Bree, it's always a pleasure to get you on the show and share any of your journeys. Obviously, reliving everything to do with Beijing. And as we will always say, best of luck moving forward. And I'm sure we'll get you on again in the lead up to Milan. And we talk about Ben 2. Going through to Italy and then cheering you on towards your second Olympics. But we appreciate your time on the show today.
Thank you very much. It's always fun to have a chat. So I look forward to our next one.